Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, c'est un plaisir de vous voir encore. Moi, je m'appelle Max Derrat. Oh, bon Dieu. Quoi? Sorry, I had the French captions on. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Differently Wired Show, episode 18. Good to be with you all again. My name, of course, is Max Derrat. And I did that because people enjoyed the French from last week. Joining me, as always, for our lovely, lovely show is equally lovely John Tucker, I suppose. I mean, he was chastising me about my use of swear words, even though I rarely ever swear on this show. It was the one time, John. The one
Oh,
time.
I know. But all the rest of the times.
Yeah, off air. Okay, like I'm decent when it comes to public conversation. Off air, I'm like a drunk sailor, an Irish drunk sailor.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Come on, come on. All right, so let's just jump right into things. It's good to be with you all again, guys. Let me just see who's in the YouTube chat right now. Hi, Jenny May. Hello, Rodrigo. Emerald Queen. Good to see you again. Devin S. Just your average. That's a good name. Just your average doormat. That's a. Hold on. Is that your real face, sir? Just your average doormat? Just saying you're looking fine. Okay, let's just get a couple of things out of the way as we usually do at the beginning of each episode. Facebook. We have a page. You should all know this by now. If you haven't liked it, what's the matter with you? I'm not chastising you. I'm just asking what the matter is. You should go do it. It's cool. It's free. All right. And then also, we have a Discord server. Edited out the names to protect the innocent. No, I'm kidding. But we have a steadily growing Discord server. In case you guys didn't know, we highly encourage you guys go there, particularly if you have issues related to autism or mental health. We got a great community there. Everybody's incredibly friendly and incredibly helpful to one another. Plus, if you're a gamer and you're into movies, we've got separate channels for that where you guys can go talk about that. I just wanted to let you guys know before we get into the main topic that we have a couple of things that we have to do or take care of right off the top. First of all, we got a super chat, $4.99 from Alina DeHaller. Alina, you are the real MVP of today. Congratulations. She writes, "Hey Max, can you please do a video on misophonia? See the 2016 edition of the Amazon magazine of the same name for the article, I'm Allergic to You." Well, to be honest with you, Elena, we actually read your super chat, John and I, before we started. And to be honest with you, we didn't know what misophonia was. Although, funnily enough, John took a stab in the dark as to what it actually was. And he said, fear of, what'd you say?
Records.
Fear of records,
You know.
yes. And John and I kind of laughed at that, but oddly enough, he wasn't that far off. For those who don't know what misophonia is, it's hatred of noise. I think that's what I read when I looked up the Wikipedia article doing my last 2 minutes of research before the show. Yeah, I could probably do something on that, Elena. I mean, one of the main traits of having autism, a common one, is extreme sensitivity to anything that affects our senses, particularly when it comes to noise. So I think it'd be kind of interesting to see how extreme that dislike of any form of sound can be. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, and hopefully John and I can address that on next week's show. And then finally, we got one Twitter question that I promised we would get to this week. We didn't have time for it on last week's show. This Twitter question comes to us from Zachary Antle, and he says, "Hi Max, I'm an aspiring filmmaker too, but I have doubts about my ability to do that kind of work. I get exhausted easy and mentally feel rather lazy presented with certain challenges, and I live in the Midwest if that says anything. What do you suggest I do?" Well, I don't see what living in the Midwest has to do with anything. What I would say is that if you're actually enthusiastic about pursuing a film career, you're sure that's what you want to do, you got to go to the cities where that sort of thing is happening. If you live in the U.S., obviously that's California and New York. If you live in Canada, that's Toronto. But I think you're speaking more about how to get started because you're talking about how you get mentally exhausted easy. I totally understand that, dude. Honestly, just today I've been doing a whole lot of reading, preparing for the show. And even before we started the show today, I was feeling quite mentally exhausted. What you sort of have to do is you have to, and we keep saying this, but it's really the truth. It really kind of is a cure-all for, well, not a cure-all, but it's something that you can reliably expect positive results from. You got to set up some form of schedule, and it's going to take a lot of time formulating it to figure out what works best for you. But once you do it, once you get up in the morning, you know you have everything set out in front of you so that you know you're going to be productive. You just have to do the things that you've laid out in front of you. Then the worries of becoming mentally exhausted don't really enter your mind. You just wake up and you find yourself being able to get through your work because you're not really having to think about or allow different thoughts to enter your brain and prevent you from doing the work that you're doing. And in regards to filmmaking, the first thing that I would recommend you do if you're looking to get your foot in the door, obviously, is to build up your portfolio. Are you looking to become an actor? Are you looking to become an editor? Are you looking to become a director? You have to figure out whether or not you want to focus on one thing or multiple things. And then you have to put like your headshots together if you want to be an actor, if you want to be an editor or like somebody who operates a camera. You got to put together a reel of your different videos and stuff like that. Like, for example, just today, actually, I applied for a job for a journalism position at a place called Subverse. Some of you might know that. A guy named Tim Pool runs it. And what I did is I sent in a bunch of examples of my work on YouTube, as well as my work in real life. So that's the first step. If you have any other questions in respect to this, what is his name? Oh, Zachary. If you have any other questions in respect to this, Zachary, feel free to tweet to me anytime at my Twitter account, at MaxDerrat, all one word, or feel free to email me back using the email maxderrat@yahoo.ca. John, anything you want to say to Zachary?
No, I think you covered it very well.
Sometimes I feel like I should get you to read out these questions so that way you can lead off and I'm not taking the lead here, John.
That's okay. Yeah. You need the outlet, right?
What are you saying? That I have too much pent-up energy?
There you go.
I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Oh, it's a wonderful thing, Max.
One thing you don't know about John, guys, is he's massively sarcastic off air. No, I'm kidding. He's wonderful. Anyways, let's go on to the main topic of today. And the main topic was suggested to us by, who suggested it to us? Let me just look this up real quickly. It was suggested to us by, I think, a guy named Planeswalker. Darn it. I'm having a hard time finding his name. No, it wasn't Planeswalker. Sorry, I'm having a hard time remember who it was that suggested this to us. I apologize, guys. But the main topic of today is naivety and autism. And I'm kind of surprised that we haven't discussed this on the show in the past because you think about all the symptoms that come along with having AS. And I've dealt with a majority of them in my Truth About Asperger's series. But one that I haven't really given proper full attention to is the fact that people on the spectrum tend to be quite naive and gullible. I have my own experiences that I want to talk about in respect to this topic, and they're pretty brutal, as they tend to be with anybody on the spectrum that I've noticed. But John, I was just wondering, like, maybe if you could just start the conversation off. I want to give you some airtime for once. And
airtime is good.
Yes, airtime is good.
Well, one of the things that occurred to me when I'm dealing with my clients is that there is so much going on in their head, so much going on around them, that they really don't have time to be manipulative and, figure out ways to cheat. So they kind of need things to be straight. So my clients, I don't know if it's true for everybody who's differently wired, but my clients tend to be really, really honest. And so they allow stuff to be known about them right out front, unless they hide away. If the world is too much, then they'll hide in the basement and not talk to anybody. But when they're out and about, they tend to be very straightforward. And that's kind of naive because people can take advantage of you when you give them a lot of information. So there are kinds of things you should do to protect yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to blurt out stuff that you wish you hadn't blurted out. That happens to everybody. But one of the other things about this naivete is it's kind of refreshing because it's honest. And so one of the things I would do is to make sure, and we've said this a few times before, you should be around people that are not so toxic when you can. You should work at places that are friendly when you can. You don't want to be in a place where people are planning and plotting and taking advantage of you. That's just generally. That's my first thoughts on that.
Hmm. One thing that you said there that's absolutely true is because our minds are so chaotic and we have a whole bunch of different information just pulling our minds down and drilling us into the ground on a unfortunately on a daily basis. Any form of kindness or refuge from that chaos is welcome. So that the fact is, because we're socially awkward, we tend to be quite afraid of people, and it's mostly because in the past we've had a lot of negative social interactions. So when somebody is kind to us and seems to accept us for what we are, we tend to lunge at them. I don't know, like I don't know
Like,
what's his name in From Here to Eternity on the beach. That's a weird example, but you get what I mean. Sorry, what were you about to
mm,
say, John?
no, no, it's like it's eagerness. It's a refuge. It's a welcome change. You know,
Yeah,
people
exactly.
people are enthusiastic about that. And if you've had a life of challenges, that amplifies the need for safe refuge, oasis. And when you tend to see that, you will kind of lunge, and gravitate towards somebody who seems to be good. But be careful buying used cars, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in respect to like used cars, in my version of used cars in my life, um, the people that I tended to gravitate to for the sake of just being able to find any form of friendship, it was really because I was in a place where I did feel socially awkward and I was just seeking anybody that would seemingly accept me for who I was. And the first time that really sort of happened was when I was in high school, right? And because it's an awkward time for everybody. You're just entering puberty. You're getting to that point in your life where you have to start making hard decisions for yourself. And if you have AS and you haven't actually developed any feasible social skills for the most part because you've spent most of your life pursuing your interests or pursuing academics or something, and you haven't spent any of that mental energy towards social life, going into high school is a big pain in the ass. And thankfully, because I generally try to be as friendly and as honest as I can, like John said, people on the spectrum tend to be pretty straightforward and kind, just even if we might be direct to our own detriment, people tend to appreciate that. And as a result, people seem to grab onto the positive elements of my naivety and exploit that. Well, not exploit that, but just embrace that so that you could sort of build some sort of friendship off of that, right? And what happened in high school was because of this naivety, it sort of came out as a sort of childlike innocence, which is the positive element of naivety, right?
It
And
is. It is.
throughout high school, I found because I'm not trying to be, how do I say this? I'm not trying to be arrogant. I'm just trying to be objective about what happened, even though sometimes I might pretend to be arrogant for colorful and comedic effect. But when I was in high
Hmm.
school, from what I understand, I was a decent looking chap. And because I did have sort of that shyness and naivety, it came across as charming to a lot of people. That's why the majority of my friends in high school tended to be women. And unfortunately, because of my desire to just be open to everybody, if it meant that I could have their friendship, people tended to take advantage of that. And that pattern is seen quite frequently among people who have AS. They find themselves blindly getting into these relationships, platonic or otherwise, with other people, and they find themselves taken advantage of. And if you want some good examples of how this transpired, for me personally, when I was in high school, you can look at my video The Truth About Asperger's Syndrome Part 4, where I go into detail about the subject of intimate relationships and how people tended to treat me in high school for the most part. And because and one other thing I want to add before I get John to jump back in here is that because we're so socially inept at first, when those first types of betrayal happen, you find yourself having your mood swing from one extreme to the other. So you go from this youthful, childlike innocence and your naivety, and then when somebody takes advantage of that, your emotions swing from one extreme to the other, and you become internally bloodthirsty. And I know there's tons of other people on the spectrum that empathize with me in regards to this. I've talked to a lot of them in my own Discord server, and unfortunately, allowing that to go unchecked can lead to some detrimental effects. For the most part, because people who have AS are so inwardly concerned, they're less likely to take that out on others, that inner chaos. But sometimes it does happen, and when it does, the worst possible thing can happen. But thankfully for me, it didn't. I was able to internalize most of it without it killing me. And now, John, like, you've obviously seen that aspect in regards to me, having me having been your client for a while. How often have you seen sort of that emotional swing in your clients?
Oh, it's almost inevitable
Right.
that people who are betrayed by certain situations and threatened by situations will swing from safe to unsafe. So there's nothing more promising to aggravate anxiety than a shifting ground of what can I trust, who can I believe, who all these people seem they turn on me. So I mean, it's not uncommon for in the schoolyard, for instance, for people to bully one another. But if you're differently wired, this can bring you to whole deep holes of sadness and misery when you're quite young. So having, as Ninja points out, having a good circle of friends is a wonderful thing to have. And it takes a while necessarily to find them. So a lot of friends is not great. A couple of good friends is kind of great. The other thing I wanted to mention, if people are having trouble with social, the way of communicating can be fine tuned for you. So, in some cases, for instance, and we'll talk about this later in one of the mailbag
Yep.
questions.
Yep.
In some cases, people can use online communications to their advantage as opposed to a lot of the networking at parties and things, or they can use emails, or they can go, they can use writing instead of speaking to do some of their communicating work. And the writing gives you time and space to make decisions. Say, okay, I can size this up. I don't have to blurt something out. I can write it. I can look at it. So sometimes you can use just simply changing the mode of communications can give you new opportunities to size up a situation before you get lost into something and you're trapped by some innocent mistake.
Sorry, say that last part again, John. You sort of cut out there.
You have time when you change the writing motif. The motif of communication, by slowing it down, you have time to save yourself from some innocent mistake.
Exactly. Because, in my lifetime, whenever it comes to arguments that I have, I tend to remain perfectly civil. Once again, not being arrogant, I'm being completely honest. I tend to remain perfectly civil when it comes to the conversations that I have with people online, even when it comes to really heated subjects. But if you have them in person, and you're worried about the way that your body language is, what your body language is communicating to the other person, whether or not you'll be able to maintain all this information going to your head, you run the risk of having some sort of meltdown on the spot, right? But in person, I just had this dumb thought go through my head. You can participate in a form of psychological warfare once you're doing text communication with people, especially when it comes to people you don't like and you're having arguments with people online, because when you're texting with people and you say something to them and they wait for you to respond, and then there's a little ... I don't know if that's on Facebook or on Twitter, as they're waiting to respond, and you're just sitting there with bated breath. You can use that to mess with people. Nah, I'm kidding, but it's just a weird thought that came to my head. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you, John. Like one of the things that text communication really helps people with AS is once you're doing things through text, you're able to step back from the situation momentarily and maybe take 1 or 2 minutes to think about how you're going to respond, and thus making sure that you're not taken advantage of. Obviously, it takes a little bit of work, especially if you're young, because you sort of have to experience some adversity at first in order to be able to learn and make sure those types of experience don't repeat. But there are ways that you can minimize the damage, as you just laid out there, John. I don't know. Like, I mean, I have several stories in regards to naivety, but I don't think we have that much time. Like we were discussing before the show, John actually has to leave a little bit early. You're going to Newfoundland? That's what you said, right, John?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
right. And that just reminds me, I completely forgot to mention this at the top of the show. But before we move on to the mailbag segment, I just want to let you guys know that in case you haven't read the community post that I did a couple days ago, videos on this channel are going to be a little bit slow. I like the dense content that I usually do in terms of my video game videos. That's going to be slow. I might put out a fluffy little thing like what I did last Monday, where I reviewed Detective Pikachu for you guys. But for now, things are going to be a little bit slow, and the reason why is twofold. One, a family member of mine died last Thursday, and second of all, I'm having health problems of my own, which I won't disclose, but just trust me. But I imagine that we'll still be able to do this at our usual time, this show weekly, so don't worry about that, but just bear with me as we try to sort things out. So, with that out of the way, let me just take a look at the chat here. Everybody's doing okay. Emerald Queen, IKA8, good to see you. Samson, Reverent Consciousness. I love these people's names, man. All right. Let's move on to our next segment. And this next segment is simply the mailbag, as I'm sure a lot of you know. Mailbag is pretty self-explanatory. We go into our mailbag, pick out a couple of questions, throw away the bad ones. No, I'm kidding. We've never done that. Unless, somebody from, I don't know, some Middle Eastern country is trying to convince us that he's a prince or something. But anyways, we go into the mailbag, we pick out a couple of questions, and we read them out on air. If you want to be a part of the mailbag segment, there's two ways. Well, there's really one way that you can do it. And then we have a live question segment at the end of the show. But for the mailbag segment, if you want your question to be read on the show, all you have to do is send it in to maxderrat@yahoo.ca. That's the email that you see on screen right now, maxderrat, all one word, @yahoo.ca. And if you want to be a part of the live question segment towards the end of the show, all you have to do is go on Twitter and use the hashtag differentlywired, all one word, doesn't matter if you use capitals, yada, yada, yada. So, first and foremost, Siri? Was that you, John?
I don't know.
I just heard the Siri.
Oh, it might have been.
Okay. Siri, what's the meaning of life? The meaning of life is 42. What does that even mean? Okay. First question comes to us from Bad1080. And Bad, I know you're listening right now, man. Thank you so much for sending this in. The thing is, I had to edit down your email just a little bit because it was a little bit too long. But I think we got the general message across. I just had to edit out some of the symptoms that you included. So, Bad 1080 says, hello, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, thank you so much for writing in, Bad. We really appreciate it. From listening to the podcast, I could see myself somewhere on the Asperger's spectrum. The difficulty I am having is to isolate one diagnosis from another. A lot of times, doctors simply tell me I am depressed. I myself think I am suffering from a childhood post-traumatic stress disorder. On Discord, you offered me to email me your story. I can present it to John, and he could... Sorry, let me read that again. On Discord, you offered email your story. I can present it to John, and he can give his professional thoughts. Thanks again for that. Well, that's no problem, dude. That's the whole point of the mailbag segment. We're very happy to read anything you guys send in. Since it is all a spectrum and there is overlap, it is hard to single out a diagnosis and to convince somebody that this is what I actually suffer from. I tried several antidepressants. They mostly make me feel dizzy with very little positive effect. With venlafaxine, the one where I had no nausea taking it, side effects aside, I felt disconnected from my feelings, which was even worse for me than at least feeling something. Before I continue on with this email, I just want to echo bad sentiments. Yeah, that's I once took Cipralex. That was the first antidepressant I ever took. And I can tell you the only thing that's worse than feeling like all the worst negative emotions is feeling absolutely nothing. It's the most indescribable, horrible thing. So I feel you there, man. My symptoms are chronic fatigue, not just feeling tired, but completely exhausted. Dissociation in certain situations. I've broken off all contact to my parents. Sensory overload. My sense of smell is heavily enhanced. Stuff can quickly become too much for me, just filling out a form. A very fine antenna for the situation around/attitude towards me. Very introspective and analytical. Very emotional. I cried all through Les Miserables. Hey man, if it was the movie version, when Anne Hathaway starts singing, I didn't cry, but the goosebumps were real, man. I would definitely say that I was depressed until I found out what my problem, the childhood post-traumatic stress disorder, is, with the help of books by Peter Levine and Gabrielle Kahn, and my ex who is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder herself. Now the problem is to find competent help. Even talking to a hospital which specializes in regular trauma, they tell me they treat me under depression. And then finally, he lists a couple of other examples from his childhood. I was abandoned by my parents on several different occasions, physically and emotionally. My father was mostly completely absent. When I was 10 or 11, I was heard in divorce court about where I want to stay in the future. My mother hates men and herself and life, and was constantly bad-mouthing my father. On the other hand, I was oversupplied with presents, money, and food by her. I had no emotional backing as a child. My mother was either an early anti-vaxxer or didn't care enough, so I suffered from measles and chickenpox. Now, as I said, the symptoms that Bad listed, as well as the examples from his childhood that he listed, there's more that we just weren't able to include for the sake of time. But, wow. Well, again, I want to give John some more airtime. I have my own thoughts on this, but I'll save them. John, do you want to take this first?
Yeah, sure. Pardon me. To begin with, you're on a merry-go-round of trying to chase a precise diagnosis. There are a number of different things going on, and you may never get exactly a razor-sharp, laser-focused diagnosis that works for you. But the closest sounds to me like complex PTSD. And if you were to deal with all the childhood traumas, then a lot of that stuff would start to become less powerful. Now, you can find out more about PTSD. It's complex or developmental. You can get PTSD by being in a war zone or being in the kind of war zone that you were in all your life. And Gabor Mate, who wrote When the Body Says No, says you can get PTSD from things that happened to your mother before you were born. Calls it intergenerational, or the grandparents, almost like an inherited thing.
Oh, really? I didn't
Anyway,
know that.
yeah. No, it's his theory, and a lot of the trauma-informed therapists are starting to have a look at this intergenerational PTSD so that you grow up with the damn stuff. But anyway, look at Gabor Mate, another chap who does conferences and writes wonderfully about it is Bezel van der Kolk, When the Body Keeps the Score. He talks about how the body registers the trauma that is felt, and it shows up physically in places. Now, that's to find out about it. To actually find people who can help you, you can look through online Psychology Today therapists. And in that website, Psychology Today therapists, there are disorders and challenges listed, as well as different therapies listed. So you will find things under trauma or under ADHD, or, and the therapist then will talk about what they do. The last summer I went to a trauma conference, and I listened to these guys that I'm talking about, and they talked about two therapies that are used a lot. One, EMDR, rapid eye movement, is used by a lot of people. A more elaborate one and used by a lot fewer people is called sensory motor psychotherapy. Those therapies try to put the mind and the body in sync, and they help to uncover what it is that's in your past that's causing this, this traumatic effect. So a person has had a traumatic event, the body remembers it. If you go to a therapist that wants you to talk about it, you can actually traumatize yourself more deeply. So there is a problem with certain kinds of therapies if they're not trauma informed. The people have to bring this stuff up in a safe kind of way. So what the trauma informed therapists do is try to desensitize one way or the other, so that the body is kind of calming and the mind is calming. They have processes whereby the ancient traumatic events now become simply memories and not gut memories. They're not reaching down into your body and making you sick. And there's another one. I hope she doesn't mind me mentioning her. There is a coaches Asperger's and ADHD, who is also a healer. She coaches with Skype or Zoom online. Her name is Hannah Klein. That's Chana, Hannah Klein. She and I are pals and associates, and she gave me a book at the last conference that I saw her at called Light from Darkness, from the Darkness of Illness and Physical Disability. The tagline is, what makes us ill, what keeps us ill, and how to heal. So if you specifically want to talk to somebody, you can look her up on Google, Hannah Klein. She is, as I say, a coach and a healer, and she's done many, many kinds of healing, and she can do some of these things online. So in the situation, Bad 1080, that you're looking at, I would say you can look at all of these resources, but I could certainly see you giving her a shout.
That was awesome, John. That was really good.
You're welcome.
Just one thing I wanted to add on top of that. John covered most of the territory, but there's one thing I wanted to add. Bad, he also noted that he wasn't entirely sure that he had Asperger's and he wanted to get tested for it, but his whoever he was talking to was recommended saying that they would treat him for depression, but not AS. I just wanted to tell you, Bad, sometimes you can have all the symptoms of AS, but you won't have AS. Sometimes those symptoms can arise from other mental health problems, but they don't arise from the way that your brain is wired. It's more so to do with the chemical imbalance in your brain. So what I would recommend on top of everything that John just recommended to you is one thing that I've been recommending ever since February of last year, which is to take the Autism Spectrum Quotient. It's a test. You can take it in the description box below. It's not supposed to be taken as a fully legit thing. It's something slightly better than a novelty test. It's supposed to, you take 50 questions, and depending on the score that you get, it tells you whether or not the traits that you've identified with in the test indicate whether or not you're possibly on the spectrum. Once you take that, if you score anywhere between 26 and 50, take that to whoever you speak to next in regards to seeking out an Asperger's diagnosis and ask them what they think. If they disagree with it, ask that person or that specialist or that doctor why they disagree with the test. And then get back to us and let us know how things went, okay? Thanks so much for sending that in, Bad, and I look forward to talking to you more on the Discord server. All right, next question. Sorry, I gotta cough quickly. One sec. Excuse me. God, it's like I was sick. I started getting sick on April 17th. And the sickness went away after a week, but then the cough lasts for like 2 months. It just doesn't go away. All right, next question. Comes to us from Christopher Lister. I think we took a question from you last week, didn't we, Chris? Doesn't matter, though. We're happy to receive anything that you guys send us, like I just said. Hello, Max. I do appreciate that you took the time to tackle the difficult subject of Asperger's syndrome and relationships, and I am sure you were speaking primarily from your own personal experiences. However, you started on the topic of talking about how AS affects matters within an existing relationship. That is, beginning the discussion from a step already past a huge hurdle myself and many others on spectrum face, and that is the inability to obtain a relationship to begin with. You see, I am 37 years old and have not had a girlfriend in over 10 years at this point, despite trying. The only time I did have a girlfriend, she was an unpleasant, emotionally manipulative woman that I settled for out of desperation. Thank you for everything you do. Best regards, Chris. Thanks so much for sending that in, Chris. This is a topic that we've discussed a lot on the show, and it's a very complicated one, particularly for myself, because despite the fact that my last relationship was fantastic and it ended fantastically. Outside of that, I share your inexperience when it comes to, well, not inexperience, but just awkwardness when it comes to dating. Um, let's just put this into perspective. It's difficult for anybody to obtain any secure relationship. It's hard enough for the average person. It's understandably much harder for people who have AS. One thing that I try to take solace with when I confront my difficulties regarding this particular topic is the fact that, unlike the average person, people with AS tend to have their priorities and their morals together. Like we were just discussing at the beginning of this show, people with AS tend to be a lot more direct, a lot more honest. And unfortunately, for a lot of relationships, that level of honesty is just never present. Some relationships go all the way into marriage, and those marriages last for a couple decades, and nobody's ever fully honest. Whereas those qualities people with AS tend to have naturally. So, what I would recommend is, before we actually recommend to use some methods as to go about obtaining a relationship, what I recommend is that you're upfront with these qualities, letting people know that, well, maybe not right away, but pretty soon, depending on how the whole dating process goes with whatever particular person. Just be upfront, tell them that you have AS, but be harp on the qualities that I just presented to you, the fact that we're very honest. And being honest about that, the fact that you have AS, if you come across the right person, they'll see that as a total positive. Now, unfortunately, with that level of honesty and that level of seriousness, that might scare a bunch of people off at the very beginning of the dating process, but it separates the wheat from the chaff, right? And once you find those one or two people that are willing to accept you for the way that you are, then you're able to bypass a lot of the crap that neurotypicals go through when it comes to dating. All the body language and the social cues and all that. And then you just get to enjoying each other's company. That's exactly what happened with my last relationship. We were upfront with each other right away. And we didn't have to deal with all that crap, right? Does everything I said make sense, John?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, as for actual methods, well, John, obviously, you're married. Yeah, you're married. You have more experience in.
Yeah, a bunch of times.
Yeah. Sorry, do you want to let me be more specific with what I'm trying to say? Do you have any advice in regards to how he can pursue a
Yes,
positive?
I do.
Okay, please.
Okay. The initial thing that occurs to me is that, Chris, it's important that you go to places where you are most comfortable and that where you would like to keep going. Like, don't go to places where people find dates. Go to places where people live, work, have their being, and do stuff. Whatever that is you like to do, whether it's mountain biking or singing in the church choir, doesn't matter. Go places where you're comfortable because you will meet people that have similar interests. That's a really good starting point. That's for the physical piece. Now, I wanted to mention online dating, and when this note came in, I googled best autism dating sites. There's a whole bunch of autism dating sites. So it seems to me if there are autism dating sites, you're going to be pretty upfront with the people you meet that have Asperger's, ASD, whatever, and that's the site is for. And there's a whole bunch of these things. I don't know which ones are which ones are, better than others, but it's certainly worth exploring. And Chris, we have mentioned before the 7 Cup site, which I checked out just to see what it was like as a listener. It's a beautiful site. On 7 Cups, you sign up as a listener or as someone who wants to be speaking to listeners, and you just text one another back and forth. It's a very friendly way to meet, and it's totally, totally autonomous until such time as you want to make friends with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So that 7 Cups thing is an excellent way, if you're shy at all, if for any reason, to meet people. I also think that enlisting the help of a female friend as a wing person, as a buddy who you're not romantically interested in one another, but she's interested in going with you to those places to help you navigate the scene. I think that last point, might be very powerful if you want to be face to face early in the rack.
Yeah, we're not entirely sure as to what your proclivities are or desires are when it comes to the way you approach things. Maybe you are able to deal with some face-to-face stuff a little bit more easily than I am. A couple different methods that you can try. And I just wanted to say, on top of what John just said about 7 Cups, I just mentioned about my last relationship. That's actually where I met my last girlfriend, and we were together for just over 2 years. And also, Subsidian from last week, he recommended eHarmony. I don't know much about that, aside from the fact that out of all the major dating sites like OkCupid and the like, eHarmony is supposedly the best. I mean, I know a friend of my dad's, he actually met his wife there, so maybe that's worth a try too.
Yeah, that seems to be a pretty credible site, a very thorough investigation of one another before you connect somehow or another.
Yeah, I think he said something about taking tests or something before you
Yeah, I think there was a fairly elaborate process of setting it up. So
Okay.
it's not just, flick, switch, and,
Yeah, swipe right.
show your elbow.
Yeah. Swipe right for me, ladies. All right,
Yeah.
moving on to the final question of the day. Comes to us from thanks so much for sending that in, Chris. The final question comes to us from Travis. He says, I'm a 28-year-old male that could use your opinion of if I exhibit any relatable signs or symptoms in a few minutes of video I have. The video is important because it shows my physical reactions. It isn't violent or anything distasteful. I am not trolling you. I've been diagnosed with general anxiety and ADHD since childhood. I relate to the meltdowns and they have caused grief, and I have lost people I care about because of it, and their opinions of me after the meltdown. I've never been violent. I've asked therapists before and genuinely want to know. I score borderline on my computer just said that OBS disconnected. The stream just went offline. Hold on, really? Are you serious, guys? Oh no, wait, I think we're good. Can you guys hear us? Just let me know in the chat. I think we're good, so I'm just gonna keep going. I've asked therapists before and genuinely want to know. I score borderline on honestly answered 50-question tests, but when I brought it up, it seems the therapist tends to think if someone is borderline that I should be happy. He says it's just some people can be socially inept sometimes. Ugh. I know you can't diagnose me. I just trust your observation of cues. I obscured the video with high brightness sensitivity options on my desk cam. If you think you could check it out, it's less than 10 minutes long. I would use the cues you would point out to talk with another therapist. My life has been a comedy of meltdowns and drama. I still have night terror dreams about elementary school and the consequences of procrastination. Let me know if you want me to send you the file. Thank you for your dedication to enlighten the communities you frequent. Well, it's my pleasure, and it's John's pleasure, Travis. Thanks so much for sending that in. So Travis didn't send us the video in his initial email, but I just figured that if we address it on.
Send it in.
Yeah, you can send it in, dude. Yeah. I'm not sure if you would want us to show it on the show. I mean, obviously, we would want to get your permission before we did something like that. But we'd be more than happy to receive it, and if you want, we can address it through an email exchange, if that's okay.
Perfect. I would like to pick up on something that caught my eye in Travis's note.
Yeah.
And that is, he doesn't seem totally comfortable with his therapist. He's not sure they're taking him seriously. And it can happen that you might go from coach to therapist to therapist. You might go to a bunch of different people before the perfect synergy is there. Don't worry about that. Some people call me up and I'm too ugly, too old, whatever. Some other people call me up and I'm the best thing since sliced bread. So it's good for you to take the time to talk to the therapist. It is worthwhile to find one that shows respect and empathy. Now, you will know that they are listening to you without interruption and judgment as the sign that they show in respect and empathy. That's what you need. If they're kind of saying, well, you look up stuff on Google, I'm not paying attention to that. Wrong place, wrong room. You got to go where somebody respects you and listens to you and makes you feel as though your opinion matters, like you count. So I think, you got to feel about that. It's your dime or $200 or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Somebody actually say that you looked ugly and that's why they didn't want your services?
Now, I made that up. Of course, nobody would ever say that.
Yeah, I was just about to say, you got the visage of a Greek god or whatever. No, wait, that's me. Anyways, let's go. That's it. No, I'm kidding. Anyways, thanks so much for sending that in, Travis. We'd be happy to look at the video if you send it to us. So like I said, we're going to have to cut this show about 10 minutes short because John has to get ready to go to the Newfoundland and Labrador. Yes, that's the name of one of the provinces up here, us kooky Canadians. But before we conclude, I just want to do the usual stuff. In regards to the mailbag segment, we really, really love to receive emails from you guys. We're actually running a little bit short. I mean, we do have a decent amount left, but we still want to try and help as many people as we can. And if you want to get your question on the show talked about relatively soon, now's the time to send it in. And to do that, just use the email you see on screen right now, which is maxderrat@yahoo.ca. Or if you want to be a part of the live question segment towards the end of the show, if there are Twitter questions, just use the hashtag differentlywired on Twitter. And also, if you want to support the show, there's a couple ways you can do that, while also simultaneously getting your question addressed on show. You can use the super chat function, as Alina did earlier in the show. All you have to do is go to the bottom of the top of the chat box. You'll see a $sign there. And feel free to send us whatever donation you can. We always put it back towards the show, and we really appreciate it. If you want to support the show beyond that, there are two ways you can do it. One, obviously, is financially. There's a PayPal link in the description box below. Once again, all proceeds go towards the show, making it possible, spreading awareness, helping people as best we can in regards to their issues. Aside from that, I understand not everybody has the financial means, and that's fine. I just want to recommend that if you want to help out this channel or the show, the best thing that you guys can possibly do is twofold. One, hit that like button. Just hit it. Don't even think about it. Just do it. Just get like Shia LaBeouf and just do it. Don't let your memes be dreams. All right. Just do it. And also, if you like any of the videos that we do on this channel and you think somebody else can get some good out of it, maybe get the resources that they desperately need, just take the video and share it with them. Share it on your social media. I can't tell you how much that has helped me in the past, guys. It's pretty much exactly how we were able to get Subsidian on from the Triple S League. And we're going to be having him on again in the future, all thanks to you guys. So if you want to be a part of our continued mission for world domination, please share and like. With that out of the way, John, thank you so much as always. Always a pleasure to do this with you, sir. And I hope you have a okay time in Newfoundland. You'll be back for next week, right?
I will.
Okay. Well, until that time, guys, my name is Max Derrat. Stay yellow.